Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So I've shown you the setting up the FRM 303. I've shown you setting up the PL18 on EdgeTX and how to do the hardware mods. There's a million and one guides out there showing you how to use these for flight, but I want to set this up for a ground RC. So it's a bit of a learning curve on this because it's not what you're used to seeing, but if you're looking at this for a ground RC, especially the speedrun guys, I mean with the 303 on it, you can have an extended range antenna and externally power the 303 and you can get some crazy range out of it. So I could see why speedrun might be looking at this kind of controller, especially on the EdgeTX firmware, because you can literally do whatever you like. But let's bring you in for a close-up look. I'll run you through a basic setup to get throttle and steering working, and so it kind of makes sense, and I'll show you a few of the other things that it can do. First off, we're going to have to choose as RC and power as transmitter on.
Welcome to EdgeTX.
And for this one, just in case you're curious, this one is running the INR4 GYB receiver, so you can get some extra telemetry back on that. If I remember, I'll show you. But this is completely blank radio. So if we go into EdgeTX firmware, then there's radio settings. Then this is where you set your time and date. You can also go into alarms and set your low voltage for the battery, because this will drive you mad. So if we've got the voltage set,
Transmitter battery low.
so it'll constantly tell you transmitter battery's low. So it's well worth going in and setting that to start with.
Transmitter battery low.
Else it'll keep doing it. So on this, we just set our voltage to the minimum voltage you want your battery to be at, and then you're good to go. And then we've got sound on off, inactive 10 minutes, so it'll warn you. You can go into your sounds and change all the pitch and everything of the beeps and the volumes. You've got haptic feedback, so you can change the strength at vibration motor. If we're going to enable features, if you're not going to be using any of the features to make the menus a bit tidier, we can turn these off. So at the minute we're not going to be using any of these special functions or anything. So I just want to keep this as basic as possible for you, make it as easy as you can to set up. Then we got backlight settings, so you can change your minimum and maximum brightness and change what modes it runs in. There's a hell of a lot you can do with this transmitter. Change your country code, change your units for imperial or metric. But yeah, it's got a hell of a lot of functionality, and you can also change your modes down here for mode 1 and 2. So it flicks where the throttle is and where everything else is. Makes more sense to a plane, but the way I'm going to show you to set it up, it shouldn't bother you. So first off, we're going to go into manage models. So we've got as first model. What I like to do is create a label. So we can go into here and I'll just set this as RC Cars. You'll have to bear with me because I'm looking sideways across this transmitter, so kinda is what it is. And then we just need to press save on that menu. Then we can see we've got nothing under as RC Cars. So if we go into Model 2, you can go into Label and you can throw it into RC Cars. Then it appears under there. Because it's yellow and that's the only one we've got, that means that's the model that we're working on. If you want to create a new one, you can go in, New Model, just choose Blank Template for an RC car, and then if we go into Manage Models, you'll have one in your RC Cars, and then you'll have the new one under unlabeled. So you can go in, put that in RC Cars, and then your unlabeled will disappear. And then you've got model 1 and 2. If you want to get rid of one, you've always got to have one, but if you want to get rid of one, select the one that's not yellow. So we can either select model,
Throttle warning.
and then that'll flick onto your next model memory, what you've selected. If you want to go back, press it, select model,
Warning.
and it'll come back. If you want to delete one, press and hold it, and as long as it's not the one that's selected, you'll be able to delete it. Once we got the model selected, we can come back out, go into our model setup, then we want to give it a name. So we can name as model. We can also choose which label it's in. If you've got an image saved onto the memory, you can select an image, but on this one we've got no image files. Then we want to tell it that we're using the FRM 303, and you'll hear the module come alive. Then we've got the option of how we're connecting to it. So I believe on this one it'll connect under routine 18 channel, but we've only got 4 channels, so let's drop that down to 4. So depending on what type of servos you're running, you can come in here and you can choose custom, or I've got 333 Hertz, would work fine for the ESC and the servo, so I'll just set all 4 channels to that. And then we got the bind option. Now I'm not going to bind it just yet because we need to set a few things up. So on here you've also got other options, so you can enable features for this model. Now I've globally turned them off on the first menu, but you can turn them back on. So if just on this model you wanted curves enabled or logical switches, you can turn them on in here. Also got the option of throttle, so you can reverse them or do what you want or change which is which, but for setting it up like this we just need to be in model setting. Then we're going to go to his first page, so in here we can just delete all of them. Some people find it easier if we start by deleting them all. So we need to add a physical control, so as channel 1 we're going to use for steering. So if we just name it steer, then we're looking for an input. So if you do that, it'll highlight the one it's picking it up on. I'm not going to change any of the other settings. Then we need to add our channel 2, which we're going to use for throttle. And then again, select your input. Then you can see it's working. So that's giving the radio what physical inputs we're going to configure. Then we go to his next one, and these are what it's going to actually make it do, or the mixers. So for these you can either reuse the ones that's there, or you can just quickly delete them. So we're going to add one for channel 1. Then again, so we know what it is. Then we're going to look for the input. So if you move it, if you move the one that you want, it'll jump back to it. So we don't need to change anything else. We've got a steering on channel 1. Then we go in to channel 2. So again, we need it as throttle. So we go on here, and if you move anything about, as soon as you move it in the direction what you're wanting, it'll highlight it for you. So we've got that set. Now, how these radios work, if you imagine physical, then your mix, then your output. So we then go to as output, and we're going to want to see what we're getting. So we can see channel 2, we've got throttle. Channel 1, we've got some steering. So once we've got that set, we're then going to need to bind to the RC. So for this, I'll go back to model settings, go to as external RF, scroll down to the bottom, put it in bind mode. Then we're going to press and hold as bind button. We're going to turn it on, and you should see it's bound. So I'll quickly unplug as fans because it'll drive you mad. But once this is bound, we should then have as throttle and as steering. But as steering needs reversing, so then we go into our output, we go into a steering, we go edit, and then you can see you've got invert. So if we invert it, then we've got a steering in the right direction. While we're on here, you can set your endpoints. This is where it's going to be a little bit weird depending on what radio you've used before, because usually you'll go to the endpoint and you'll press minus to turn it down. But the way flight controllers work, you've got min and max. So turning left, which is the original direction, we can see as wheel is going, but it's going too far. So on this, you need to add to it, which will take it away. If you press that, it'll go quicker. So if we quickly look, we can back as endpoint off that way. But then when we go to this side, we need to back it off in the negative. So that's how you set your endpoints. And then it's all live as you're actually doing it. So if we're looking at this one, it'll highlight the one in yellow that it's actually changing. So if we look at this one and you think I've backed it off too much, then we can add a bit to it. If you use this, it'll go really, really slowly, so it's really fine tuning. If you use the outside ones, it'll go a lot quicker, but that's how you get all your endpoints set. Do the channel reversing in here, not in the other two, so not in your physical and not in your mix. It's better if you do it on here, because then your trims will follow. So if we come out and we go to channel monitor, so you can see we've got a steering, and if we want to make it go slightly to the left, even though we've reversed the channel, the trims followed it. And if we want to go right, you hold your trim right and it'll actually go right. And you do get the beep when it's at its center point. So I think on this one we just need a little bit of trim, but that should get it right. Don't forget to calibrate your ESC. So I've already had this set up and running, so I know with this radio it's calibrated, but as a rule I would recalibrate it. So we've got a screen, you can see all your trims. So if we move trims, you can see where they're set to. So also on the radio settings, we've got as themes. So you can change your actual theme colour, make your own up, send them to radio, do whatever you like. I'll leave that on default. Then we've got, for the battery gauge, you've got your minimum and maximum voltage. You've got what the battery's actually reading at, so if you stick a multimeter on it you can calibrate that. You've got your real-time clock battery. You've got your calibration for your radio, so to calibrate all the sticks and everything. And then you've got the switches, keys and analogs. So if you go into switches, as you move a switch, it'll show you which one's changing, and you can make sure that you've got all your switches set as they should be. So if you swap one of these out for a 3 position that was a 2 position, you can then go in here and correct it. Exactly the same for analogs. You can check what everything's doing, make sure it's all working. Then if we press and we go into a screens, here you can choose a grid layout. So if we drop down here, then you can go to set up widgets. You can click on it and you can have various different readouts. So if you wanted a value, you can click on that and you've got all the various different things that it's actually reading, that it can show you the value of on screen. So battery, shadow, you've got 3.3 volt of your battery, and it's nice that we've got these real little shortcuts that we can jump through. So on that you can have your channel 1 steering on screen if you really wanted to. So other things we can do if we want telemetry. So on as model settings or radio settings, when we're on enable features, down at the bottom we can turn telemetry on. You can also turn telemetry on through enable features in your model setting. So make sure it's on. There we get the telemetry icon when we bound up. You can go to discover and it'll discover all the telemetry sensors. So we even get in the BVD, and I believe it reads temp, yeah, so it'll read the temperature as well. Then we can click stop. We can go back to a screen. So if we go screen settings, we can go to select widgets. You can now go in here, and if we go on gauges, we've then got the telemetry icon, so we can have the BVD reading. So you can have that as a gauge. Obviously it'll only work when it's connected in. If you want to change widget, we can go to actual values, and again we can go into this menu, narrow it down to telemetry, so we can go BVD and give it a shadow, and we get in 0 reading because I ain't got cable in, but you can have it reading it. I believe it reads temp as well, so if we go back in, go to that, and then if we go down, there's a temperature one somewhere in here. Yeah, so it's got a temp probe in it, so you can read that. If you wanted, say, your throttle position, so let's have a look. So we can go for a gauge, go on it, move the throttle, it'll highlight it for you. Then you can have your throttle position reading. But yeah, just a quick sort of guide on how you can set this thing up for using with a ground RC, and you've got all your basic features there, plus a bit of telemetry if you want. If you've got more telemetry sensors set up on the FlySky receiver, when you go to discover, it'll pick them up and you can have them displayed as and when you like on the screen. There is a lot more in-depth stuff that you can do with this, so you can have temperature sensors set to trip a logical switch, then have that logical switch control a channel, so there's no reason why you couldn't have a switch powering a fan and then a temperature sensor on the actual ESC or motor, and you can have a certain temperature trigger a value that will turn that fan on to keep your motor down to operating temperature. The list of stuff you can do with this OS is absolutely insane. But trying to keep it simple, just to give you the basics of setting endpoints and getting telemetry and a few ideas of how you can configure the screen. So hope that helps some of you guys out, but let's wrap this one up. So there you have it, just a quick basic guide, if you like, to how to set up a bit of the telemetry so you can have the readings of it, and just the basic configuration of how you'd make one of these your throttle and one of these your steering. The list of stuff you can do with EdgeTX is absolutely staggering. The more you learn about it, the more you learn what it can do, and even think of new stuff that you didn't think a controller was capable of doing. Especially when you start looking at sensors and how you can make them make a logical switch and then flip that logical switch at a certain point and trigger an action on another channel. It is absolutely insane. And the PL18 is definitely a heck of a lot more useful once you've got it fully opened up on this kind of firmware. But hopefully you find that useful, entertaining, or you just like listening to my incessant ramblings. But thanks for watching Wtf Rc Cars, and catch you guys again in the next one.